His unconditional love, if you just go back, Mark chapter 14, look right above our key text, you see the Lord's Supper. The Lord's Supper, they didn't call it the Lord's Supper that day, they called it the Passover. And if you're Jewish, you know all about the Passover, but none of us probably are. If you look at their Passover meal, it's different. It's not like the Passover was supposed to be. A typical Passover, you were supposed to have the bread, the wine, and the lamb, because no meal is complete without the meat, right? Unless you're vegetarian, which is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But they had the bread, the wine, and the lamb. But at the Lord's Supper, they didn't have that. They didn't have any lamb. At the Lord's Supper, or at the Passover, typically what they were going to do is they would break the bread, and as they broke the bread, they would say, this is symbolic of the suffering of our fathers in the wilderness. Because it was about the Exodus, Israelites leaving Egypt, slavery to Egypt. And the bread was always unleavened. Why? To remind them that they had to rush out, that they couldn't dilly-dally, they had to rush out of Egypt. But Jesus, when he breaks the bread, he doesn't say, this is the suffering of our fathers in the wilderness. What does he say? He breaks the bread and he says, this is my body broken for you. This is my suffering. This is my affliction. When they passed the cup during the Passover, they passed it around 4 times. They got really toasted. I'm just kidding. They passed it around 4 times, and it was symbolic of the 4 promises of God. Okay? You want to know what they are? Number 1, I'll bring you out. Promise 1. I'll rid you of your bondage. I'm going to free you from slavery. I'm going to pay your redemption price. So there's a price to be paid for your freedom. I'm going to pay it. And then the 4th promise is I'll take you away to be my people. I'm taking you to the promised land. Those are the 4 promises. And every time they had the Passover, they would pass the cup 4 times, symbolic of those 4 promises. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus, when he passes the cup, what does he say? This is my blood, which is shed for you. So he wasn't talking about an old promise in the Old Testament. He's talking about a new promise, not an old covenant. He's talking about a new covenant. In fact, he actually says, this is the cup of the new covenant in my blood in Luke's gospel. What's he saying? He's basically telling his disciples, I'm unconditionally committed to you. Just as God was unconditionally committed to the people of Israel and getting them out of slavery to Egypt, I'm telling you, I'm unconditionally committed to you, getting you out of slavery to bondage to sin in your life. That it's not going to be the suffering of our fathers in the wilderness that's going to save you, but it's going to be my suffering on the cross. And then instead of having lamb, he never served the meat. Instead of having lamb on the table, Jesus is saying the lamb is at the table. I'm the lamb. I'm the sacrifice. I'm the thing that has to die in order for you to live. Because during the Old Testament Passover, when the angel of death came, the only people who were saved were the people who had the blood of the lamb painted over the doorposts. It didn't matter if you were Israelite or not. It's not as if God is a respecter of persons. You could be an Israelite, you could be an Egyptian. You would die if you weren't covered by the blood of the Lamb. And Jesus is saying, I'm that Lamb. And I'll cover you. I'll save you. I'll take you to be my people. I'll pay your redemption price, but you've got to be covered by my blood. It's my suffering. I'm the Lamb.